Hey guys, tonight we slip into stiff boots and heavier expectations, standing on a damp cobblestone street where gaslight flickers like a nervous thought, and the air smells faintly of coal smoke and damp wool. You're dressed for calling hours, gloves buttoned tight, heart thumping as if it knows something you don't yet. Marriage is supposed to be the warm hearth at the center of this world, the prize at the end of polite conversation and perfectly timed smiles. But you probably won't survive this without raising an eyebrow. Because what you're about to enter is less fairy tale, more legal agreement with lace trim. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and local time in the comments. Somewhere, someone else is listening under a different moon. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into Victorian courtship like a carefully choreographed dance, all measured glances and supervised strolls. You don't date, you call, you don't text, you leave cards. You don't flirt freely, you perform. The mainstream fact everyone agrees on is that courtship is public by design. Parents, chaperones, and the entire neighborhood function as a low-budget surveillance state. A walk in the park is never just a walk, it's a resume review conducted by binoculars. You learn quickly that reputation is a fragile teacup, one crack and it never holds heat again. You feel the pressure of time. If you're middle class, your window is narrow. Too young and you're green, too old and you're whispered about. Working class courtship moves faster, practical and blunt, because rent does not wait for romance. Upper class courtship stretches longer, padded with seasons in Bath or Brighton, but the stakes are higher: titles, estates, alliances. Historians still argue whether Victorian romance is genuinely repressed or simply rerouted into elaborate rituals, like feelings forced to wear corsets. Either way, you sense that love is allowed, but only if it behaves. The quirky tidbit arrives with the calling card. Some young women keep meticulous ledgers tracking who visits when and how long, proto-spreadsheets of the heart. You imagine color-coding prospects like an Excel sheet with better penmanship. Light joke number 1. If only they'd invented read receipts, half the anxiety would evaporate with the gaslight. Another oddity floats by in advice manuals, warning you not to laugh too loudly, lest you appear unladylike, which is Victorian for audible joy is suspicious. You practice a softer laugh like a teacup clearing its throat. You're told marriage is destiny, but it's also logistics. Property matters, income matters, health matters, though it's discussed in euphemisms that could put a riddle to sleep. You are assessed for fertility, without anyone daring to say the word. Teeth are inspected. Posture is judged. Your mother's nerves are noted, because nerves are apparently hereditary and contagious. Light joke number 2. Family dinners feel like job interviews where the benefits package is a lifetime of boiled beef. Consent exists, officially. You can refuse a proposal, and many do, yet the social math is relentless. Each refusal narrows options not because you're difficult, but because society assumes you are. The engagement itself is a public promise, and breaking it can trigger scandal and even lawsuits for breach of promise. A real legal action that makes heartbreak a courtroom matter. Mainstream fact: breach of promise suits are common enough to fill newspapers with salacious detail, teaching everyone to be careful with rings and words. You imagine modern group chats exploding. Instead, it's ink and outrage. You begin to understand that marriage is framed as moral shelter. Religion hovers nearby, nodding approvingly. Sermons praise the angel in the house, a phrase that sounds like wings but feels like walls. Historians still argue whether women internalize this ideal willingly or negotiate with it pragmatically, bending without breaking. You try on the idea like a borrowed coat, warm, restrictive, not quite yours. The proposal arrives not in a cinematic downpour, but in a sitting room, under supervision, with a question phrased like a polite suggestion. You say yes or no, and the room exhales. If yes, congratulations, you've entered the anteroom of a contract. Engagement gifts appear, including the ring, which in some circles is worn on the right hand until the wedding. Quirky tidbit: engagement rings aren't universally diamond. Gemstones vary wildly, and some rings are repurposed family relics, heavy with other people's stories. Like joke number 3. Nothing says romance like inheriting a ring that's seen 3 previous marriages and 1 scandal. As preparations begin, you notice how your agency subtly narrows. Decisions multiply, yet your vote counts less. The trousseau is assembled. Linen, underthings, practical beauty. Friends offer advice with the confidence of people repeating what they've heard, not what they've tested. You are warned about money without numbers, intimacy without details, and obedience without a definition. The wedding itself is a public performance, binding you before witnesses who will remember if you falter. You sense the shift already, from daughter to wife, from potential to role. This is not a cliff, it's a slope, gentle enough to miss while sliding. The law looms, unnamed for now, but present like a shadow at noon. Courtship has carried you to the threshold, and you pause, hand on the door, listening to the house breathe. Somewhere, a clock ticks, marking the end of one name and the beginning of another. The door closes behind you, softly but decisively, and the room you enter is not a bedroom or a kitchen. It's the law, not a courtroom with wigs and gavels, but something quieter and far more intimate. The mainstream fact at the center of Victorian marriage is coverture, the legal doctrine that folds your identity into your husband's the moment vows are exchanged. You don't vanish in a puff of smoke. You are absorbed like ink into blotting paper. You can feel it in the way documents are signed, not by you, but for you. You wake the morning after marriage with the same hands, the same thoughts, and yet something has shifted. Legally, you cannot own property independently, cannot enter contracts, cannot sue or be sued in your own name. If you had savings, they now belong to him, unless carefully protected beforehand. Your wages, should you earn any, are his by default. Historians still argue whether women experience this as sudden shock or gradual adjustment, but you notice the change immediately in small bureaucratic ways. Letters addressed to Mr. and Mrs., where your first name quietly dissolves. There are exceptions, of course, and Victorians love an exception the way cats love warm laundry. The marriage settlement becomes your faint hope, a pre-wedding legal arrangement that can preserve some property or income for your use. These are more common among the middle and upper classes, negotiated by fathers and lawyers over tea that tastes faintly of strategy. Quirky tidbit: some settlements include clauses specifying pin money, a personal allowance meant for your small expenses, which sounds charming until you realize it's like an allowance app without notifications. Light joke number 1. Congratulations, you've been downgraded to a premium subscription with parental controls. You learn the language of dependence quickly. If you're injured, the law treats your husband as the injured party. If you're wronged, he is the one withstanding. Your body, your labor, your time, these are wrapped into a single legal package labeled household. The state recognizes him as the household's voice, and you as its echo. It's not that the law hates you, it simply assumes you don't exist separately. This assumption is so complete that many Victorians find it comforting, like a heavy quilt that smothers and warms at the same time. There are cracks in the quilt. Widows, for instance, step back into legal personhood with startling speed. If you outlive him, you can own property, manage finances, even vote in some local elections depending on the era and place. This sudden competence raises eyebrows and fuels debate. Historians still argue whether widowhood is quietly empowering or merely a return to normalcy delayed by marriage. You file the thought away, morbid but practical, like knowing where the fire exit is. Daily life under coverture means asking permission without asking. You don't request money, you receive it. You don't decide, you suggest. Many husbands are kind, some indifferent, a few cruel, but the system doesn't require cruelty to function. It runs on habit. You internalize it, adjusting your expectations the way eyes adjust to low light. Light joke number 2. You develop a sixth sense for where the purse is, like a homing pigeon with excellent manners. The press debates coverture with the intensity of people arguing about furniture placement. Sure, it matters, but the house is already built. Reformers begin to murmur, especially as industrialization pulls more women into paid labor. The contradiction becomes obvious. How can you earn wages you do not legally control? Court cases surface, messy and fascinating, where women test the boundaries and sometimes win small concessions. The Married Women's Property Acts loom in the future, not yet your reality, but you hear whispers. Change smells like ink and dust. Religion offers its own commentary, quoting scripture about unity and order. Sermons frame coverture as divine design, a harmony of roles rather than a hierarchy. You try to feel the harmony while noticing the imbalance. The idea is that two become one, but you can't help noticing which one does the talking. Light joke number 3. It's a duet where one singer has the microphone and the other hums enthusiastically. Socially, coverture simplifies things. Invitations, correspondence, and obligations funnel through him. You gain status through marriage. Yes, but it's borrowed status, like wearing a coat that isn't yours. If he rises, you rise. If he falls, you fall harder, because there's no legal net with your name on it. Quirky tidbit. Some women keep private diaries under lock and key, the one place where I remains intact and unchallenged. Paper becomes a refuge. You notice how the law shapes emotion. Dependence can feel like safety on cold days and suffocation on warm ones. Arguments carry a different weight when one person has legal gravity. You learn to negotiate with tone, timing, and silence. This is not universal misery. Many marriages are affectionate partnerships within constraint. But affection does not cancel structure. Historians still argue whether everyday kindness mitigated legal inequality or merely softened its edges. As weeks pass, coverture becomes background noise, like a clock you stop hearing until it breaks. You move through rooms and routines, aware that your name has become a prefix. You are Mrs. Someone, legally speaking, and the law is satisfied. You adjust your stride to match his, not just on the street, but on paper. And as you do, you realize that marriage has not only joined two lives, it has edited one of them. Morning arrives without asking your permission. Pale light slipping through curtains that smell faintly of soap and coal dust. Your day begins before the house fully wakes, because household labor is not a job with hours, it is a condition. The mainstream fact is blunt and widely agreed upon. For Victorian women, especially wives, domestic work is unpaid, unending, and socially invisible, yet it defines respectability more than any ring ever could. You are judged not by what you own, but by how smoothly everything runs. You move through tasks that stack like falling dominoes. Fires need laying, water must be hauled or boiled, meals planned around what's affordable and available. Laundry alone is a small epic, involving tubs, muscle, weather and prayers. Middle-class homes add management to the mix. Servants to direct, schedules to keep, faults to correct without appearing unkind. Working-class homes compress everything. Paid labor outside, unpaid labor inside, until your day feels like one long breath you forget to release. Historians still argue whether the rise of domestic ideology elevates women's moral authority or traps them in idealized exhaustion. There's a rhythm to it, hypnotic if you let it be. You learn the sounds of your house the way sailors learn the sea. The kettles hiss, the stairs creak, the moment silence means trouble. Quirky tidbit. Some Victorian manuals recommend specific daily schedules broken down to the quarter hour, as if life might behave if properly timetabled. Light joke number 1. Even your to-do list needs a nap after reading it. Cleanliness is next to godliness, and both are apparently your responsibility. Dust is the enemy. Not because it harms health, though it does, but because it signals moral failure. A dusty mantle suggests a dusty character. You scrub, sweep, polish, and air rooms regardless of the weather. Because fresh air is believed to chase away miasma and bad thoughts with equal enthusiasm. The labor is physical, repetitive, and oddly strategic. You plan routes to save steps, like a chess game played with brooms. If you have servants, your labor shifts but does not shrink. Management is work, especially when you're meant to be both firm and gentle, authoritative yet pleasant. You correct mistakes quietly, because a sharp word reflects poorly on you. The house becomes a stage, and you are both director and understudy. Light joke number 2, performance reviews happen at breakfast, and no one signed an HR policy. Meals anchor the day. You plan menus within budgets that flex like stiff fabric. Some give, mostly resistance. Cooking involves timing and improvisation, coaxing flavor from simple ingredients. A successful dinner earns praise that somehow belongs to your husband. A failed one is yours alone. Mainstream fact, domestic manuals insist that a wife's competence at table is a reflection of her moral worth, which is a lot of pressure for a pot of stew. There are moments of pride. You step back from a clean room, a well-run household, and feel something like accomplishment. It's real, even if it's not rewarded with wages or titles. Yet the body keeps score. Backs ache, hands chap, lungs fill with smoke. Health advice is contradictory. Work hard but don't strain. Keep moving but remain delicate. Historians still argue whether domestic labor improved women's health through activity or damaged it through overwork and exposure. The quirky tidbit drifts in with the laundry. Some households use blue bags or powders to counteract yellowing linens, tinting whites faintly blue. It works. Mostly. You smile at the idea of color-correcting fabric before photography exists. Light joke number 3, Victorian Instagram filters. Now available in soap form. Time blurs. There are no weekends in the modern sense, only Sundays with different clothes and similar chores. Leisure is stolen in sips, reading a few pages, sharing a laugh, pausing by a window. Guilt often follows rest, a learned reflex. You measure yourself against an ideal that no one fully meets and everyone pretends to. The angel in the house does not sweat according to poetry, you do, quietly. Evenings bring a different labor, emotional smoothing. You listen, soothe, anticipate moods. This work has no tools and no end, but it's noticed when absent. The household's comfort rests on your attentiveness. You become skilled at preempting problems. An invisible safety net. Mainstream fact. Victorian culture explicitly frames this emotional caretaking as a wife's duty, though it never names it as labor. As night settles, you finally sit, muscles humming like a distant machine. You think about how much of your day will repeat tomorrow and the next. There's comfort in routine and a quiet terror in its permanence. You are indispensable and replaceable at the same time. The house sleeps because you do not. And as you drift toward rest, you realize that marriage has given you a kingdom measured in rooms and a workload that fills them all. Money moves through your life like a river. You're not allowed to swim in. You can see it, hear it, sometimes cup your hands in it, but the current belongs to someone else. The mainstream fact is straightforward and heavy. After marriage, most Victorian women do not control household finances, even when they manage the household economy daily. You are expected to stretch funds, not steer them. Before marriage, money is discussed in coded phrases: comfortable, modest, well provided for. After marriage, it becomes concrete and oddly distant. Your husband earns, inherits, or invests. You receive an allowance, often called housekeeping money or PIN money. This sum covers food, supplies, and sometimes your personal needs, though the line between the two is intentionally blurry. Historians still argue whether allowances provide women a measure of autonomy or simply formalize dependence. You suspect it's both, depending on the week. You become an expert in budgets without authority. You know the price of bread, coal, candles, and soap, and you can calculate savings in your head while stirring porridge. You bargain with shopkeepers, keep mental ledgers, and plan for lean months. Yet if funds fall short, the shortfall reflects on you. Light joke number 1. You're blamed for inflation. Decades before economists make it fashionable. Dowries and marriage portions haunt conversations long after the wedding. If you brought money into the marriage, it likely merged into his estate unless protected by a settlement. In some families, dowries are spent quickly on visible respectability, furniture, clothes, appearances, leaving you with little leverage later. Quirky tidbit. Some women stash small sums in sewing boxes or books. Emergency cash is so common they're almost expected. It's thrift meets espionage. Light joke number 2. Congratulations, you've invented the sock drawer fund. Class shapes everything. Working class wives often handle wages directly, especially if husbands are paid daily or weekly in cash. This can grant practical control, though not legal ownership. Middle class wives juggle allowances with appearances. Too frugal, and you seem miserly. Too generous, and you're reckless. Upper class wives oversee large households but may have astonishingly little say over the fortunes that support them. Historians still argue whether class offers freedom or simply different flavors of constraint. Debt is a quiet spectre. Credit exists, but it's dangerous. Shopkeepers extend it based on reputation, and your reputation is tied to your husband's name. If bills go unpaid, whispers follow. You learn to smooth accounts with charm and punctuality, because the alternative is social embarrassment. Mainstream fact. Women can be held socially responsible for debts they do not legally own, a neat trick that keeps everyone anxious. You also learn the emotional weight of money. Requests feel personal, even when they're practical. You time them carefully, attaching them to good moods or successful dinners. This is not manipulation. It's survival within a system that rewards tact. Light joke number 3. You develop a sixth sense for the exact moment to mention the coal bill, like a financial weather app. Savings are encouraged in theory and difficult in practice. Banks are male-dominated spaces. Some women use savings clubs or informal networks instead. Insurance emerges as a new idea, promising security through paperwork. You read pamphlets that frame thrift as moral virtue, implying poverty is a character flaw. Historians still argue whether Victorian thrift culture empowers women or shames them into impossible standards. There are moments of agency. You decide what to buy, where to economize, how to allocate resources within the household. These choices matter, even if they're bounded. You can improve comfort, nutrition, and small joys through careful management. Yet the ceiling remains. Big decisions, investments, moves, risks are not yours to make. You feel the limits most sharply during crises, when money's absence becomes loud. As the day closes, you count coins and plans, knowing tomorrow will demand the same careful dance. Money, like marriage, is ever present and rarely discussed plainly. You master its language anyway, fluent in a dialect of restraint and resourcefulness. And as you tuck away the last account, you realize that while money may not pass through your hands freely, your labor keeps it moving. Night falls, and with it comes a subject everyone knows exists and no one quite names. Intimacy is discussed in Victorian marriage the way fog is discussed, acknowledged, inevitable, and preferably not stared at too closely. The mainstream fact is that sex within marriage is widely framed as a duty rather than a desire, something you provide as part of the marital package, like meals or clean linen. Pleasure is optional, obligation is not. You learn this indirectly, through silence and suggestion. Mothers offer vague warnings about patience and kindness. Manuals speak of marital relations in language so delicate it practically tiptoes. Doctors advise moderation for men and endurance for women, as if the act is a weather event you must simply wait out. Historians still argue whether Victorian women are truly ignorant about sex, or merely forced to pretend they are. You suspect it's a learned performance, one that keeps peace. Consent as a concept is hazy. Marital rape is not recognized in law. The prevailing belief is that marriage implies permanent consent. This is not debated seriously until much later. You feel the weight of this assumption in the way your needs are secondary, often invisible. Yet individual marriages vary wildly. Some couples share affection and mutual care. Others operate on grim routine. The system does not require tenderness to function. Light joke number 1. Romance manuals promise bliss and deliver a pamphlet-sized footnote. Pregnancy looms over intimacy like a shadow you can't step out of. Contraception exists in fragmented forms, withdrawal, condoms made of animal membrane, pessaries, but information is patchy and moralized. Many women rely on timing and hope, which is not a strategy so much as a prayer. Quirky tidbit. Some Victorian advice columns recommend cold baths or vigorous exercise to dampen desire, a wellness trend no one asked for. Light joke number 2. Victorian cold plunges. Now with extra repression. You are expected to be modest, which often means silent. Expressing desire risks judgment. Expressing reluctance risks conflict. The ideal wife is receptive, but not enthusiastic. Present, but not demanding. This tightrope walk shapes your inner life. You learn to read moods, to anticipate nights when saying no is not an option. Historians still argue whether women developed subtle forms of negotiation within these constraints or simply endured. The truth, like most truths, likely sprawls somewhere in between. Medical beliefs complicate everything. Doctors warn that too much sex drains female vitality, even as they insist on regular marital relations to maintain harmony. Female pleasure is acknowledged by some and denied by others, treated as either dangerous or irrelevant. You navigate this contradictory advice while living in a body that has its own opinions. Mainstream fact. Victorian medicine often frames women as naturally passive in sex, a claim that says more about theory than experience. There are bright spots. Letters and diaries reveal genuine affection, humor, and closeness between spouses. Some couples find companionship that softens obligation into something warmer. You treasure these moments, knowing they are not guaranteed by vows alone. Light joke number 3. It turns out communication helps, even in corsets. Public morality policies private life. Divorce is rare, difficult, and scandalous, especially for women. Adultery by husbands is frowned upon but often tolerated. By wives, it is catastrophic. The double standard is clear and crushing. You guard your reputation fiercely because it is your social currency. Quirky tidbit. Some women use euphemistic language in diaries, flowers, weather, metaphors, to record experiences without naming them, creating a coded archive of feeling. Religion offers comfort and constraint. Sermons emphasize marital harmony and self-sacrifice, often leaning harder on wives. You try to align your private reality with public virtue, smoothing rough edges in prayer and routine. Historians still argue whether faith provided solace or reinforced silence. You feel both effects depending on the night. As years pass, intimacy settles into pattern. Children arrive, spacing uncertain. Recovery incomplete. Fatigue reshapes desire. You adapt because adaptation is the quiet skill Victorian women master best. The bedroom becomes another room of labor, though one rarely acknowledged as such. And as you drift toward sleep, you recognize that in this era, love survives not because it is easy, but because people keep finding ways, small, imperfect, human, to make room for it. Your body becomes a calendar. Its months counted in whispers and worried looks. Pregnancy is expected, almost immediately, and its arrival is greeted with congratulations layered over anxiety. The mainstream fact is stark. Victorian childbirth is dangerous, with maternal mortality rates far higher than modern ones, and every pregnancy carries real risk. You know this without numbers, because you know women who didn't come back from it. From the first missed cycle, advice pours in. Eat this, avoid that, stay calm, don't lift, but also don't be idle. Medical understanding is uneven. Doctors are increasingly present, Yet many births still happen at home with midwives, whose knowledge is practical and passed hand to hand. Historians still argue whether the medicalization of childbirth improves outcomes or introduces new dangers, especially as doctors bring unwashed hands and confident theories. You trust and fear them in equal measure. You carry on with daily work as long as you can. There is little formal rest. Pregnancy is not an illness, you're told, though it feels like one some days. Corsets are loosened or replaced with maternity stays. A small mercy. Quirky tidbit. Some women wear specially designed pregnancy corsets meant to support without compression, an engineering compromise that satisfies fashion and biology about as well as you'd expect. Light joke number 1. Even your organs are expected to respect dress codes. Birth itself is a private ordeal made public by necessity. Neighbours listen for news. Family waits. Pain relief is limited. Laudanum and later chloroform appear, sparking moral debate. Queen Victoria's use of chloroform famously legitimizes it for many, a mainstream fact that ripples outward. Historians still argue whether this marks progress or simply masks suffering without addressing cause. You don't care much about the argument in the moment. You care about breathing. Infant mortality is heartbreakingly common. Babies arrive fragile, and many do not stay. You are told to be stoic, to accept God's will, to try again. Grief is folded into routine, mourned quietly because life does not pause. Light joke number 2, gently placed. If resilience were a currency, you'd be independently wealthy by now. Breastfeeding is expected and encouraged, framed as moral duty and health practice. Wet nurses exist, particularly among the wealthy, but they're controversial, criticized for separating mother and child. You navigate advice that shifts with fashion and class. Quirky tidbit. Some manuals warn that a mother's emotions can sour milk, adding anxiety to exhaustion. Light joke number 3. No pressure, just keep your feelings immaculate. Repeated pregnancies take a toll. Bodies weaken, backs ache, teeth suffer. Nutrition is uneven, vitamins are not yet understood. You age quickly in a world that measures women by youth. Yet you keep going, because stopping is not presented as an option. Historians still argue whether high fertility is primarily cultural expectation or lack of effective contraception. Motherhood reshapes your identity. You become responsible not only for survival but for moral formation. Children reflect you according to society, especially their manners and cleanliness. Fathers discipline, mothers nurture. The division is neat on paper and messy in life. Mainstream fact: Victorian ideology casts mothers as primary moral guides, a heavy crown to wear while sleep-deprived. As the years stack, you mark time by births and losses, by the changing weight of children in your arms. Fear never fully leaves, but it dulls, like a constant ache you learn to ignore. At night, you rest a hand on your belly, flat or rounded, and breathe. Marriage has bound you to another life, and motherhood has multiplied that bond, stretching your capacity until you discover it stretches back. The house grows crowded in a new way. Not with children this time, but with eyes. Servants, neighbours, relatives, all of them orbit your marriage, watching for signs that things are running as they should. The mainstream fact is that Victorian households are intensely hierarchical, and if you have servants, you stand at the centre of that hierarchy, while also being judged by how smoothly it operates. You are both supervisor and exhibit. Managing servants is presented as a mark of refinement. You are expected to direct without barking, correct without humiliating, and maintain order without appearing controlling. Advice manuals insist this is a natural female talent, which is convenient because it absolves everyone else from teaching you how to do it. Historians still argue whether this managerial role gives women real authority or merely extends domestic labour into new rooms. You feel the authority in moments and the burden all the time. Privacy is scarce. Servants live in close quarters, hear arguments through walls, notice patterns. You learn to perform calm. Even your silences are interpreted. A raised eyebrow at breakfast becomes gossip by supper. Quirky tidbit. Some middle-class homes install bells in every room, an early intercom system that summons help and announces your presence. Light joke number 1. Victorian smart homes. But only one direction works. Class anxiety hums beneath every interaction. You must maintain distance without cruelty, familiarity without friendship. Servants know your routines better than you do, and you know their reputations can affect yours. Dismissals ripple outward, marking you as either too harsh or too soft. Mainstream fact: high servant turnover is common, and managing it becomes a constant background task. You keep references like talismans. Status is visible in details. The number of servants, their uniforms, the shine on silver. Your marriage is evaluated through these markers. A well-run household reflects well on your husband's career and standing. If something goes wrong, the blame finds you. Historians still argue whether women used this visibility to exert influence indirectly or were simply made responsible for outcomes they couldn't fully control. You suspect both are true again. Social surveillance extends beyond the house. Neighbors note who visits, when curtains are drawn, how often you attend church. A missed appearance sparks concern or suspicion. Light joke number 2. Victorian social media runs on walk-bys and raised eyebrows. There are moments of connection, shared jokes in the kitchen, quiet kindnesses, mutual dependence during illness. These moments are unofficial and fragile. Quirky tidbit. Some servants stay for decades, becoming quasi-family members with intimate knowledge of your life. Light joke number 3. They've seen more of your marriage than you have, and they're very discreet, mostly. As evening settles, you close doors and hope for quiet. Yet even alone, you feel the presence of watchers, real and imagined. Marriage has placed you on display, a living proof of order and respectability. You smooth your dress, your voice, your life, and in the soft clink of bells and footsteps, you learn that in Victorian marriage, privacy is a luxury few can afford. The house can be full and still feel hollow. You share rooms, meals, and obligations, yet loneliness slips in like a draft through old windows. Marriage promises companionship, but it does not guarantee it. The mainstream fact is that Victorian emotional life is often constrained by role expectations, leaving many wives isolated even within busy households. You learn that proximity is not the same as intimacy. Letters become lifelines. If your husband travels for work or simply retreats into long hours, you pour yourself onto paper. Ink carries what conversation cannot. Love letters range from tender to practical, sometimes both in the same paragraph. Historians still argue whether Victorian couples are emotionally distant by nature or simply trained to express feeling in controlled ways. You suspect emotion is there, carefully wrapped like fragile china. Loneliness is not always dramatic. It's the quiet of afternoons when children nap and servants are busy elsewhere. It's having thoughts with no safe audience. You read novels and recognize yourself between the lines, especially in heroines who wait. Quirky tidbit. Circulating libraries censor improper novels, which makes the remaining ones all the more precious. Light joke number 1. Forbidden books are just Victorian clickbait. Friendship offers relief. Tea visits, sewing circles, church groups. These become spaces where you can exhale. Gossip flows, sometimes cruel, often comforting. Sharing stories turns private burdens into communal knowledge. Mainstream fact. Women's social networks are crucial for emotional survival, though rarely acknowledged as such. You trade advice and empathy in equal measure. Yet, even friendships are policed. Too much visiting suggests neglect at home. Too much confidence risks reputation. You calibrate every interaction. Historians still argue whether women's friendships are a quiet form of resistance or simply another sanctioned outlet. You don't label it, you feel it working. Marriage itself can soften over time. Early formality gives way to habits, inside jokes, shared glances. Some couples grow closer as roles settle, others drift. Light joke number 2. Nothing tests romance like discussing household budgets by candlelight. Religion frames loneliness as a test, patience as virtue. You pray, sometimes finding comfort, sometimes just words. Quirky tidbit. Some women keep prayer journals that read like emotional diaries in disguise. Light joke number 3. Journaling, but make it spiritual. As evening returns, you sit with your thoughts, the house breathing around you. Marriage has given you a partner, but solitude still claims it's ours. You learn to live with it, to fill it with letters, friendships, and quiet resilience. In the stillness, you discover that loneliness does not mean lovelessness. It means you are human, waiting for connection in a world that often whispers instead of speaks. There are moments when the walls feel closer, not because the house has shrunk, but because power has clarified itself. Marriage, you are told, is protection. And sometimes it is, but the mainstream fact, difficult and unavoidable, is that Victorian law gives husbands wide authority over wives, and that authority can turn harmful with few immediate remedies. The system assumes benevolence. It does not require it. Arguments are meant to stay private. A raised voice is already a failure. Visible bruises are scandalous but not necessarily actionable. Physical discipline of wives is increasingly frowned upon as the century progresses, yet enforcement is uneven and sympathy unreliable. Historians still argue whether declining tolerance reflects genuine reform or simply better manners masking the same imbalance. You feel the difference between what is said and what is done. If harm occurs, options are limited. You can appeal to family, clergy, or neighbors, but each step risks reputation. Divorce exists, but it is expensive, public, and heavily biased. Adultery by a wife is grounds enough. By a husband, it often requires additional cruelty. Mainstream fact: until late-century reforms, divorce is largely a privilege of the wealthy and a gamble for women. You weigh safety against survival. The law offers partial shields. Separation orders and maintenance payments exist in theory, but accessing them demands proof and persistence. Courts scrutinize your character as much as his actions. Quirky tidbit: newspapers sometimes cover divorce trials like serialized dramas, exposing intimate details to a hungry public. Light joke number 1: restrained. Reality TV, but with wigs and worse lighting. Not all harm is physical. Financial control, isolation, and intimidation shape daily life in quieter ways. You notice how choices narrow, how silence becomes strategy. Historians still argue whether women recognize these patterns as abuse or simply as marriage. Language matters. Without words, endurance becomes invisible. Community responses vary. Some neighbors intervene, others avert their eyes. Respectability can protect abusers as easily as victims. Light joke number 2: nothing discourages intervention like good curtains and a polite facade. There are stories of resistance, women who leave, who petition, who build new lives against the grain. These stories circulate quietly, offering hope and warning in equal measure. Quirky tidbit: some women adopt new names or move cities to escape past marriages, reinventing themselves long before social media made rebrands fashionable. Light joke number 3: Victorian soft launches, minus the announcement post. As night settles, you consider the fragility of safety when it depends on another's character. Marriage promises stability, but power distorts that promise. You hold on to small protections: friends, reputation, inner resolve, knowing they are imperfect shields. And in the hush before sleep, you acknowledge a truth rarely spoken aloud: love cannot thrive where fear is allowed to stay. Morning bells ring, and with them comes the steady hum of judgment dressed up as virtue. Religion and morality thread through your marriage like stitching, mostly invisible, occasionally too tight. The mainstream fact is that Victorian society leans heavily on religious ideals to define marital roles, casting wives as moral guardians responsible for the spiritual tone of the household. You are expected to be the conscience with good posture. Sermons praise obedience, patience, and self-sacrifice, often delivered by men who return home to quiet studies and hot meals. You sit in pews absorbing lessons that translate directly into daily expectations. Historians still argue whether religion empowers women by granting moral authority or confines them by sanctifying submission. You experience both outcomes depending on the day and the preacher. Respectability becomes a currency you spend carefully. Church attendance is not just about faith, it's about visibility. Absence invites speculation, presence invites scrutiny. You dress appropriately, sing softly, nod at the right moments. Light joke number 1: even your sins are expected to be well organized. Moral reform movements swirl around you: temperance, purity, charity, often led by women. These offer sanctioned outlets for public action, allowing you to step beyond the home while still appearing virtuous. Quirky tidbit: temperance meetings sometimes feature elaborate pledges and symbolic tokens, like ribbons or pins, wearable proof of righteousness. Light joke number 2: Victorian merit badges, but make it abstinent. Yet morality cuts both ways. You are held to higher standards than your husband, especially regarding sexuality and demeanor. A single misstep can undo years of careful living. Mainstream fact: double standards are openly acknowledged and rarely challenged in polite society. You internalize vigilance, monitoring speech, dress, even facial expressions. Religion also offers comfort. Hymns soothe, rituals anchor time, prayer provides a private language for fear and hope. You cling to these moments, finding space to breathe. Historians still argue whether faith provided genuine solace or merely taught acceptance. You don't separate the two, you need both. As evening falls, you review the day's moral ledger, balancing duty and desire. Marriage, framed as sacred, leaves little room for error. You smooth your skirt, your conscience, your life. And beneath the hymns and rules you sense a quiet truth: morality here is not just belief, it is performance, and you are always on stage. Your hands learn new shapes depending on your class. Work, paid or unpaid, never truly leaves the picture, it just changes its costume. The mainstream fact is that Victorian wives' relationship to work is deeply stratified by class, with working-class women far more likely to earn wages, while middle and upper-class wives are expected to present leisure as virtue. You learn quickly that idleness is not the same as rest. If you are working class, marriage rarely ends your paid labor. You take in laundry, sew piecework, sell goods or labor in factories when circumstances demand it. Children are folded into this economy early, turning households into small production units. Historians still argue whether this economic participation gives working-class wives more autonomy or simply doubles their burden. You feel the answer in your bones, both, again. Middle-class marriage insists on the illusion of non-work. Your labor is extensive, but it must look effortless. Taking paid employment risks respectability unless framed as necessity or charity. Teaching, governessing, or assisting in a family business may pass, but only with careful explanation. Light joke number 1. You are encouraged to be busy, just not employable. Upper-class wives navigate a different maze. You manage estates indirectly, host strategically, and influence through conversation rather than contracts. Your work is social engineering alliances, impressions, reputations. Mainstream fact, elite women often wield informal power, though it vanishes without the right relationships. You learn that visibility is leverage. Debates simmer. Reformers question why capable women are barred from professions. Education expands slowly, opening cracks in old rules. Historians still argue whether these changes meaningfully alter married women's lives or primarily benefit the unmarried. You watch the horizon shift, uncertain when or if it will reach you. Quirky tidbit. Some women publish anonymously or under initials to avoid scandal while earning income. Light joke number 2. Victorian side hustles. But keep your name off the invoice. As night comes, you set aside tools, needles, books, ledgers, and stretch tired fingers. Work has shaped your days regardless of recognition. Marriage did not end your usefulness, it rebranded it. And as you rest, you know that behind every non-working wife stands a mountain of labor politely pretending not to exist. You dress yourself into shape before you dress yourself into the day. Fashion is not decoration here, it is instruction. The mainstream fact is that Victorian clothing, especially for married women, is designed to signal respectability, fertility, and class, often at the expense of comfort and health. Your body becomes a canvas for expectations stitched in whalebone and thread. The corset waits, patient and persuasive. You lace it with practiced hands, adjusting tension until posture improves and breath shortens, just enough to be acceptable. Doctors debate its effects endlessly. Some warn of crushed organs and fainting, others praise support and moral discipline. Historians still argue whether corsetry is primarily oppressive or embraced by women for structure and style. You feel both truths tugging at the laces. Dress changes with marriage. Colors darken, cuts mature, frills soften. You are meant to look settled, not tempting. Pregnancy requires adaptations, looser bodices, clever tailoring, yet fashion insists you appear unchanged for as long as possible. Quirky tidbit. Some women pad dresses strategically to disguise early pregnancy, a visual sleight of hand mastered through necessity. Light joke number 1. Victorian Photoshop, now available in cotton. Health advice is a carousel. Eat heartily, but not too much. Exercise gently, but remain delicate. Fresh air cures everything, except when it doesn't. Female ailments are diagnosed broadly. Nerves, hysteria, weakness, labels that explain little and excuse much. Mainstream fact, women's pain is often minimized or misattributed, shaping generations of medical misunderstanding. You learn to describe symptoms carefully to be taken seriously. Beauty routines are domestic science experiments. Creams, powders, and tonics promise youth and vigor, sometimes containing ingredients best left unexamined. Quirky tidbit. Arsenic wafers are marketed for clear skin, a trend that feels like a bad idea because it is. Light joke number 2. Skincare routines with a side of existential risk. Bodies age quickly under strain. Childbearing, labor, and limited nutrition leave marks society pretends not to see. Yet resilience is praised. You are expected to endure gracefully, to fade quietly. Historians still argue whether Victorian culture acknowledges women's physical sacrifice or simply aestheticizes it. You feel seen and unseen at once. As evening comes, you unlatch and breathe more fully. The mirror shows a woman shaped by rules and routines, strong beneath layers. Marriage has asked your body to perform as much as your heart. You thank it silently, then slip into rest, seams loosening, expectations waiting for morning. Relief arrives in small, ordinary doses, the kind you almost miss if you're not paying attention. A shared glance over teacups, a walk timed just long enough to breathe. Friendships become pressure valves, letting steam hiss out before anything bursts. The mainstream fact is that Victorian married women rely heavily on informal social networks, friends, sisters, neighbours, to survive emotionally, even as society pretends these connections are merely pleasant extras. Gossip is the currency of these networks, and it cuts both ways. It warns and wounds, entertains and educates. You learn who to trust by who keeps quiet. Tea tables double as information hubs, where advice about childbirth, money, and marriages flows freely. Historians still argue whether gossip is a tool of social control or a subtle form of female power. You suspect it's a multi-tool, dangerous if mishandled, invaluable if used well. Friendships offer spaces where you can speak more freely, though never entirely without filter. You trade complaints carefully, padding them with humor. Laughter becomes a coping strategy, a shared language of endurance. Like joke number 1, nothing bonds people like mutual exhaustion and good biscuits. Small escapes matter. Reading a novel by the window, attending a lecture, volunteering with a charity. These moments widen the world just enough. Quirky tidbit: public lectures for women grow popular, offering intellectual stimulation wrapped in respectability. Light joke number 2, continuing education but make it chaperoned. Community events punctuate the year. Fairs, church socials, seasonal visits, they offer novelty and remind you that life exists beyond the household. Mainstream fact: these gatherings reinforce norms while also giving women limited public presence. You navigate them with practiced ease, enjoying the change without drawing attention. Friendships sometimes strain marriages. Too much independence invites suspicion. You manage perceptions, balancing loyalty at home with support elsewhere. Historians still argue whether these friendships quietly undermine patriarchal control or simply make it bearable. You don't need theory to know they help. As night falls, you replay conversations, savoring shared understanding. Marriage remains central, but it is not the whole of you. In whispered confidences and stolen hours, you reclaim fragments of self, and in these small escapes, you find the strength to return, tomorrow, to the roles that wait. Change arrives first as a rumor, then as a pamphlet, then as a meeting you hear about but don't quite attend. Reform does not crash through the door, it knocks politely and waits. The mainstream fact is that the Victorian era sees the slow rise of legal and social challenges to traditional marriage, led in large part by women who are themselves married, widowed, or very tired of pretending everything works just fine. You hear names, activists, writers, organisers, spoken with admiration or alarm depending on the room. Campaigns for married women's property rights gather steam, arguing that wives should legally own earnings and inheritances. Historians still argue whether these reforms are driven by feminist ideals or practical responses to economic change. You think it's hard to separate hunger from philosophy. Meetings are held in parlours and halls, carefully respectable, carefully radical. Women speak publicly, something that still feels transgressive even when done politely. You might attend once, heart racing, hat pinned firmly as if that helps. Quirky tidbit: some reform meetings require attendees to arrive with male relatives to deflect criticism. Activism with a chaperone. Light joke number 1, rebellion, but please bring a +1. The Married Women's Property Acts begin to pass, unevenly and gradually. For the first time, some wives can own property, control wages, and sign contracts. The law inches toward recognizing you as a person again. Mainstream fact: these acts do not dismantle coverture entirely, but they crack it. You feel the crack as possibility, even if it doesn't reach your household yet. Resistance is fierce. Critics warn that marriage will collapse, that families will dissolve into chaos. Satirical cartoons mock reformers as neglectful wives and unnatural women. Historians still argue whether public backlash slows progress or sharpens it. You watch debates unfold in print, feeling both hope and fatigue. Not all rebels march. Some resist quietly, negotiating finances, delaying pregnancies, educating daughters differently. These small acts accumulate. Light joke number 2. Change apparently comes in teaspoons. As the century edges forward, you sense the ground shifting. Marriage is still binding, still unequal, but no longer unquestioned. You fall asleep knowing that even if your life remains constrained, it is no longer static. Somewhere, someone is pushing, and the door you once closed may someday open wider. Time gathers quietly around you. Like dust you no longer rush to wipe away. Children grow, houses change hands, fashions loosen and tighten again. You reach the later chapters of marriage not with fanfare, but with accumulation, memories layered like old wallpaper. The mainstream fact is that aging, widowhood, or long marriage often alter a Victorian woman's position more dramatically than youth ever did. What you endure early can, paradoxically, open space later. If your husband lives, marriage settles into companionship, habit, or parallel lives. Authority may soften with age, especially as children leave and responsibilities thin. You find small freedoms, longer walks, deeper reading, opinions offered with less apology. Historians still argue whether aging grants women real autonomy or simply reduces scrutiny. You feel the scrutiny ease, which is freedom enough for some days. If widowhood arrives, it does so with grief and a strange release. Legally, you re-emerge. You can own property, manage money, make decisions. Mainstream fact, widows often enjoy more legal and social independence than married women, a bitter irony not lost on anyone paying attention. You mourn deeply, even as you notice doors opening. Quirky tidbit. Many widows continue wearing mourning clothes for years, sometimes for life, a visible badge that commands respect and space. Light joke number 1. The original do not approach aesthetic, entirely earned. Later life brings reflection. You measure what marriage took and what it gave. Children, if you have them, become anchors and mirrors. Friendships endure or fade. You see younger women repeating patterns you know too well. Historians still argue whether Victorian marriage improved over the century or simply changed vocabulary. You think of it as weather, sometimes fair, often harsh, always shaping the land. As nights lengthen, your pace slows. You no longer rush to meet expectations that once ruled you. The house creaks softly, breath steadies. Marriage, once the defining structure of your life, becomes one chapter among many. Now the world grows quieter, the edges blur. You rest back into the chair or the pillow or the rhythm of your own breathing. The long years soften into a single hum, like wind through trees you've known forever. Struggles filled the days have done their work and loosened their grip. You are allowed to be still now. No duties waiting, no judgments hovering. Just the gentle knowledge that you endured, adapted, and lived inside the lines you were given. And sometimes just barely outside them. Let your shoulders drop, let the thoughts thin. The house is calm, the night is kind. Sleep can take it from here.